This demonstration is for the carving of tooth number 8, the permanent maxillary right central incisor. The tools that you'll need for this are going to be a block of wax, which I will give to you in lab. You'll need your Boley gauge for measurements, and you'll need your Hollenbeck carver, which looks like a paddle, to be able to draw on the surface of the wax. The first thing that we need to do is prepare the wax for carving. So using your Boley gauge, what I'd like you to do is set the Boley gauge at 1 millimeter. Lock it in place by either the screw or the locking lever. So you should have 1 millimeter of space here at the end of these little calipers here. The wax block that you've been given will be poured from a mold. One thing I want you to look for on each side is the side that has the smoothest and the flattest area, and that side you're going to work from, which will be the labial side. On the top and the bottom, there will also be a flat side and then a dimpled side from when the wax is poured into the mold. You want to be able to make sure that you have the dimpled side up for maxillary teeth, so that way this is where the majority of the wax will be carved off, so it doesn't matter that there's actually a dimple there. So with the dimple side up, and choose your flattest surface here, what you're going to do is you're going to draw a line, a 1 millimeter line across the base here. The way to do that is by taking your little Boley gauge, and on the inside here, you're going to place that against the bottom of the block of wax, and then you're going to press lightly so that the top of the Boley gauge will actually gently carve into the wax, leaving a 1 millimeter line at the bottom here. The next thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to measure the width of the wax by opening up your Boley gauge and clamping, and then taking a measurement here. On this Boley gauge, it's showing that the reading is about 14.5 millimeters. We're just going to round that up to 14. We need to make a vertical line directly down the center of the wax. So we take the 14, divide by 2, which should be 7. I'm going to set my Boley gauge at 7. I'm going to lock it in place with the screw, or you might have a locking lever. And then I'm going to do the same thing like I did on the bottom of the block, but I'm actually going to go from the side, and I'm going to draw up the wax to create that vertical line. Now this is similar to what we did with the drawings. We're going to do the exact same thing that we did with the drawings by actually making our drawing points on the wax. So with the maxillary central incisor, as we go down the list, the very first reading that we have is the cervical incisal length of the crown, which is 10.5 millimeters. So I'm going to take my Boley gauge, I'm going to set it at 10, moving it over until my lines line up here with 0.5, locking it in place. I'm going to take my Boley gauge, I'm going to place it along that base line, and then I'm going to actually score across that vertical line a mark right at 10.5. Okay, so this is my cervical incisal length of the crown. Now, the next reading that I have is the length of the root, which is 13 millimeters. I'm going to adjust my Bowley gauge to 13 exactly. And I'm going to do the same thing by placing the Bowley gauge at that cervical incisal mark. And then I'm going to take my Hollenbeck carver and I'm going to create another line up here where the apex of the root would be. So I should have a vertical line, a horizontal line at 1 millimeter. I should have my cervical incisal line here, and also my apex of my root line here. Next, going down the list, I need to come up with the mesial distal diameter of the crown, which is 8.5. Remember, we need to take 8.5 and divide it in half. 8.5 is going to be 4.25. So I'm going to slide my Bowley gauge in place to be 4, and then 0.2 would line it up in this area, 2 lines over, so that they match. I'm going to lock it into place. And we always measure the diameter on the baseline. So I'm going to put the inside of one Bowley gauge jaw on the center line. And then I'm going to take my Hollenbeck carver and score it. Then I'm going to do the same thing. Move it over so that the inside of this Bowley gauge jaw is right on that center line. And then I'm going to score it on this other side. Okay? The next reading is the mesial distal diameter of the CEJ. The reading for the maxillary central incisor is 7. So I need to take 7 divided by 2, which is going to be 3.5. So I slide this down to 3 and line up my 0.5 measurement here. And I lock it into place. And now I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the baseline, but I'm going to do it at this cervical margin reading here. So again, I'm going to place one jaw on the center line, and then I'm going to take my Hollenbeck carver to make my mark on this side, and then the same thing on this other side here, and try to be as precise as possible. Okay. So now I have my mesial distal diameter here on the baseline. I have my 2 readings here, which is the diameter at the CEJ. I do not need to use the labiolingual diameter or the labiolingual diameter of CEJ, because those would only be used on the mesial and distal views. What I now need to look at is the curvature of the CEJ on the mesial and the curvature of the CEJ on the distal. The curvature of the CEJ on the mesial is going to be 3.5. Now remember, this is tooth number 8, and this would be on the midline here. So this would be the mesial side, and this would be the distal side. So what I need to now do is move this dot down to where the curvature of the CEJ should be. mesial is 3.5. I actually already have it set for 3.5. So I'm going to come from the center of the dot and here's my original marking. I'm going to bring it down to 3.5. I'm going to put a little mark here. Now I need to mark the distal, which is 2.5. So I'm going to slide this over to 2.5, making sure that I have it lined up so it matches at the 0.5 there. Lock it into place. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. From the mark that I had, I'm now going to bring this down from here down 2.5 here. Okay, so just like the drawings, I now have all my dots. These were the original markings, so I can actually scribble these out just a little bit. Sometimes you can get them to erase completely. Okay. Now the first thing I need to do is I need to connect my dots, and I always start with the CEJ. So I'm going to draw from the center here down on this curve, and then the same thing down here, this mesial curve. And don't worry if it's not exact, because this is just an outline. We're going to be carving to exactness later on. Now that we have the curve of the CEJ in, I'm now going to take my apex. Remember how we talked about it being a blunt, rounded apex? I'm going to put that in first, and then I'm going to draw down to this point here. And then the same thing on the other side. So I've got my root drawn in. Now what I need to do is I need to actually go from my CEJ down to the diameter marks. Okay. So that is our basic outline that we're going to start with for the labial side of tooth number 8.